Привет! I'm Chuckleinik, a Ukrainian-American baptized with the name Yaroslav, and that's the name I use in the historical reenactment group, the Society for Creative Anachronism, where I'm known as Yaroslav the Persistent. I've been researching Slavic folklore and mythology and history for decades, and I'm sharing my research on YouTube, in a video format, because I wanted to make things more accessible for members of the society who might want to develop an Eastern European persona. And I gotta tell you, what I've been doing lately, because it's summer means I read the Conan stories, and I always like the logic of how the stories got fitted together, and it's kind of the way my brain works. And I have been trying to do this with the ballads and the stories of the Bogatyri, the heroes of Slavic folklore. They're basic, think Knights of the Round Table, okay? Only they're Slavs. And trying to work out the internal logic of, what's going on in the stories as far as details. I've come to the conclusion there are no straight roads anywhere in Slavic mythology or Slavic folklore. Now, some of the characters in the epic poems, tales and ballads, they're the Bogatyri. They're the heroes. They served Prince Volodymyr Brightsun or Prince Volodymyr Redsun, whose court set in Kyiv. Except that Volodymyr's not a historical prince. He's kind of a mashup between Saint Volodymyr, who was Grand Prince of Kyiv in 980, and who converted his people to Christianity in 988. And then there's Volodymyr II, Monomach, his great-grandson, who ruled 130 years later. And one of the things I want to kind of get to in this particular installment in my series, Tales of the Borderland, is just how bizarre the geography is in these tales. The two Volodymyrs were merged into one, becoming the Arthur-like ruler of a Camelot-like court, except it's not a Camelot, it's in Kyiv. They weren't knights who sat at a round table. Instead, there were Bogatyri or Vityazi. The Bogatyri were grist for the mill of the minstrels of Rus and later Russia, the Guzliari or court poets and bards, the Skoromochi. Ukrainians would call them Kobzari, minstrels, descended from pagan priests who were still permitted great privileges. These guys were the storytellers, the minstrels, the jesters. They were the blind peddlers. They were the vagabonds of every sort. They're masters of the telling of a tale. And if you're living in a settlement that's far away from a bunch of other settlements, these folks are welcome. A Bogatyr or a Vityaz was a folk or epic hero, a warrior of immense strength, courage, and bravery, rarely using magic while fighting enemies. Those were Volodymyr's bodyguard or retinue, his gang of friends. The Bellini, the ballads that are, the heroic ones, they're sung by generations of bards, and they're transferred orally. I don't even think they were writing them down until the early 1800s. There's several hundred of these Bellini around. They're known to historians that feature the Bogatyri. There's a number of chronicles. Now, so far in the series, I've done 27 of these tales. And I'm kind of doing a review because the last time when I introduced the topic, it was with Tales of the Borderland number 13. Well, we're on number 108. So it's been a while, so forgive me, there's a bit of a review going on. All right. Now, The epic poems are usually divided into three collections. The mythological epics, older stories that were told before Kyivan Rus was founded and Christianity was brought to the region and included magic and the supernatural. The most prominent heroes in these epics were the giant Svyatogor, Vuk, Slavic, and Mikula Selyanovich. They were commonly called the Elder Bogatyrs. A lot of the stories about Bogatyri revolve around the court of Volodymyr, and those stories are called the Kyivan cycle. That's got the biggest number of Bogatyri and the most of their stories. The most notable of them were the trio of Alyosha Popovich, Dobrynya Nikitich, and Ilya Muromets, or Ilya of Murom. Each of them tends to be known for a certain character trait. Alyosha for his wits, Dobrynya for his courage, Ilya Muromets for his physical and spiritual power and integrity, and for his dedication to the protection of his homeland and his people. Then you go up north. There's the Novgorod Bogatyri. They're more like adventurers, like Vasily Buslev, a powerful street fighter, and Sadko, a musician turned very prosperous merchant. Then there's the female Bogatyr, or Polyanitsa. Think Amazon warrior. Sometimes she'd be called a Bogatyrka. Many of the more well-known Polyanitsi are wives of the famous male Bogatyri. The details get confusing. They're often very contradictory. Even if you get into physical descriptions, they will talk about a particular Bogatyr who's really angry and he's got his eyebrows dancing like two dark sables. And then they talk about blonde curly locks, and age shifts back and forth. Different Bogatyri seem to change as to which one is older, which one is younger, and so there's all that confusion. So why should geography be consistent? So the tales aren't just set around Royal Kyiv Town where Prince Volodymyr's court is, and the geography kind of gets a bit twisted. When you hear the name Svyatogor or Svyatogor, depending on whether you're using the Russian or Ukrainian pronunciation, one of the elder Bogatyri, whose name comes from Holy Mountain, you hear that he dwelt in the Holy Mountains, Svyate Hory. Okay, insert Carpathian Mountains. Another Bogatyr, Samson Samoilovich, was also assigned to the Holy Mountains. That's where his stories take place. More confusing are the names that are in the north. There are constant references to the White Lake in the Novgorod cycle of stories, and that generally means the White Lake that's in the province of Novgorod. Or it could be Lake Onega or Lake Ladoga. But under certain conditions, it might refer to the Baltic. Sometimes in the ballads, but not often, the White Sea is intended. Then there's the story of Dunai Ivanovich. He weds the daughter of the king of Lithuania, Nastasia. Except sometimes, in some of the tales, she's called Daria. When Nastasia beats Dunai in an archery competition, he can't handle it, and so he just kills her. And then he kills himself. All right, how Slavic. And where their bodies fall, from Nastasia's body flows the Nastasia River, which somehow swiftly flows through Lithuania. And where Dunai fell, the Danube River began, flowing past Kyiv, except that it doesn't. In some tales, it is the Don River, which also flows past Kyiv, except that it doesn't. Or it could be the mighty Dnipro River with its many rapids, which actually does flow past Kyiv. One of the other elder Bogatyri, the shape-changing sorcerer Volga, he's connected to an area called Volhynia, a region in Central and Eastern Europe between southeastern Poland, southwestern Belarus, western Ukraine. The borders of the region are not very well defined, and it's changed hands a number of times, so of course this fits in with the geography of the Ballads of the Bogatyri. The heroes are always using Circassian saddles, but considering that the Circassians at the time were removed from Russia, on the south, basically the Pechenegs are in between them and the Rus, and on the east, we're kind of separated with the Tatars territory, and so there's probably not a lot of trade going on for these saddles. So to me, it just seems like it was a name to be used as something exotic, kind of like having Ricardo Montalban in those old car commercials where he would talk about fine Corinthian leather. And then you basically have other peoples of the steppes, the Khazars, and then the Polovtsi, who, you could call them Kipchaks or Kumans. So you've got this whole mishmash of what's going on the steppes. Oh, let's add to the confusion. The Caspian Sea had another name in the ballads, Khvalynsk. The name of Khvalynsk is derived from Khvalisi, a people who in the 9th and 10th centuries lived at the mouth of the Volga on the shores of the Caspian Sea. By the way, higher up the Volga is the modern province of Saratov, and there's still a town, Khvalynsk, that obviously bears the name. The tales of the Bogatyr Churila Plenkovich, they also add to the confusion, because you end up hearing about the Sea of Sorok. That's the Sea of Azov. Except that there's another area that's not far from Kyiv that has a similar name. But hey, why worry about names? And beyond the Caspian, there's the mysterious land of India, except that the India that's in the ballads and in the Bellini has nothing to do with historical India. It's just simply an exotic place. And as I mentioned earlier, if you go up to the Baltic area, the Novgorod stories are set, the geography also just gets really hazy. So, this is me trying to explain why these ballads of the Bogatyri, don't try to put them in any chronological order. Don't try to make sense of the details. Just enjoy the stories. Until the next time, do pobачення.